Hey everyone, welcome to week 39. This is day 3. We're nearing, by the way, our 200th video, so that's pretty amazing. This is the week of greys. So we've done on Monday having Raw Umber be our dominant color in our mixes. Yesterday we took Raw Umber out and only used our primaries to paint with, so we had to do a lot of complementary mixing trying to achieve greyness that way. And for today, we're going to do something totally different and we'll see how it goes. So let's see. Okay, let's get started. This is day 3. This is our ongoing greys week. And as a small recap, let's look at the things that we have done in the past couple of days. On Monday, we tried to achieve greyness by having a natural neutral color, that is a raw umber, my favorite umber, be dominant in all of our mixes. That meant that every single thing that we mixed in our palette had a little bit or a lot of raw umber. And that incidence of raw umber, that natural grayness that is part of its nature, is going to end up providing us with a gray harmony that's going to envelop the whole of the painting. Now, it's up to us to determine how much or how little of raw umber we use. For Monday's painting, I'd say I used quite a bit. You know, it's a very earthy painting. I wanted to use it because of the mood. I think I pushed a little bit of character in that one. I echoed the kind of dead color of the food in the pattern of Danny's sweater. I think that gave the painting a ton of attitude, a ton of mood. And that, along with Danny's look, with just its absolute disdain. I mean, the food could have been great. It doesn't look like it's that great. She left a bunch of food in her plate. Even though that plate is full of colorful vegetables, it doesn't mean that that's life. Even though her sweater is chock full of all these swirling patterns and shapes, it doesn't mean that it's lively. So I really liked that I was going against the nature of some of the aspects of that painting. And even the grid on the mat on the table, I think it kind of echoes the fact that it's this ritual that we're supposed to enjoy, which is eating food. By the way, this is not a comment on any of this. This is just me having fun with it. But even though this is a ritual that we do every day, this mat is also kind of trapping us in this ritual. The repetition now seems absolutely boring. There's nothing that that character could eat to take her away from her misery. Even though, you know, food is supposed to bring joy and life to you and energy, this is the complete opposite. This is food that's like devoid of energy. So I know it's quite a story, but I love to imagine these things while I'm painting. So in an attempt to fit that energy that the painting has, I was like, yeah, I need to make this painting about grayness and I need to make it evident. I need to make the effect that umber has on the other colors be absolutely evident. And by the way, this is done in a very cheap watercolor paper. It's actually Artist Loft watercolor pad. And I have to say, this particular pad, was sent to me by Katie Hubbard. She's an amazing, amazing young artist. I had bought a marker drawing from her. And when she started doing gouache, I was like, oh my God, these gouaches from Katie are freaking amazing. And I bought a gouache painting from her, which, by the way, is absolutely glorious. When you see it like in real life, oh my God, it's so, so incredible. But anyways, Katie was super, super kind to send me, among, you know, a bunch of like goodies. She sent me a watercolor pad, and it's an Artist Loft, that's a brand, watercolor, 140 pound, 300 gram watercolor pad. It's 24 sheets. It's a 9-inch by 12-inch. So I'm giving you guys all the info. And when I saw the paper, I was like, oh, this is very kind of pulpy. This has a lot of like fiber. I wonder, you know, what it would feel like under the brush if I'm doing oil painting on this paper unprimed. And I started using it. By the way, this is the paper that I've been using for the show that I'm going to have in November at a Bent Gallery. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I was like, oh my God, this paper is incredible. It has like a super nice drag to it. When I paint, it looks like a silk screen. You know, there's so much kind of texture and pulp to it that it doesn't really let the paint kind of seep in. You have to work really hard to try and get the paper to receive all of the paint. But I kind of got used to it. I love trying out a surface and then having to adjust to see if I could get the most out of it, or at least the most out of my understanding of it. I'm not saying that the way I'm using this paper is the way you're supposed to use the paper, but I think I found a way to bring out the really nice qualities that I feel that the paper intrinsically has. And this is the funny thing. I ran out of that paper because it has 24 sheets and I'm supposed to do like 30 paintings for this show. And I started looking for it online and I wasn't able to find it. And I was like, where is this paper? This is probably like really, really nice paper, really good paper. That's why I'm not able to find it. So I went to a couple of art stores online, Licks and other art stores, and I was like, they don't have this pad. And I was like, what is this amazing pad that nobody carries? And in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm sure this is like so good that, it's either like out of stock everywhere or it's just really hard to find. And I thought about writing to Katie and I was like, Katie, I need more of this paper because I'm loving it and I ran out of it and now I need it for the other paintings of the show. And I was like, what am I going to do? And I searched just for the paper and lo and behold, it sent me to Michael's and the pad is like $5. The 24 sheets of this 140 pound 9 by 12 inch watercolor pad is $5. And every review in that Michael's website was like, oh my God, this paper is horrible. How can you call this watercolor paper? This is horrid. The paint seeps in and it's just absolutely terrible. 1 star. I mean, every single person was like, oh God, what is this crap? And I was laughing so hard when I saw that because, it's so weird. I'm so used to this, but it surprises me every time because what other people consider trash many times to me is like a treasure. So, and maybe that's the Colombian side of me that understands that I have to try and find the beauty in the very simple stuff that we get in art stores here. I'm very lucky and I'm grateful that I can order stuff through the internet now. But for 20 years, I just bought whatever was available. And I don't know. I don't know if it's my appreciation for really crappy stuff or the fact that them being crappy doesn't stop me from pushing and trying to get the best out of my materials. So I loved it. I thought that was a really cool anecdote. And honestly, it still is a paper that I really, really enjoy and love painting on, because it gives me qualities that no other paper I paint on gives me. And I've painted on Hahnemühle paper, I've painted on the Moleskine paper, I've painted on Fabriano paper, and for some reason, this $5 watercolor pad, I was like, oh God, this is it. This is it. So thank you, Katie. Thank you for your wonderful work. Thank you for being so generous. And thank you for introducing to me a really crappy pad that I absolutely adore. I mean, it goes hand in hand with my Silver Falcon brushes. So now I know in my mind that if I have like $10, I can paint. I can buy a brush, I can buy a pad, I can buy probably a paint set. You know what? This actually could be a good idea for a week in the future. Just the cheapest materials. And this in no way means that I would make fun of the people that would be interested in buying a painting, but it would just be a week where I'm trying to push myself and say, hey, I acknowledge I've used very expensive materials in the past, but you don't really need to use any of that to make like a really nice painting, or at least a painting that will give stuff back to you. That to me is the most important thing. Not doing a pretty painting. That's nonsense. But the most important thing in the world when you're painting is working on something that will give something back to you. To me, that's amazing. To me, that's where every single one of the paintings that we'll ever do will be helpful, will be effective, and we can find useful, and we will grow from them. They won't be mistakes. They won't be ugly paintings. They won't be crap, even though we can throw them away, because if that's what we want to do, then, by all means, go throw it away. I'm not going to stop anyone. I'm not going to make you feel weird or bad. I'm not here to judge anyone. You are the person that knows best what to do with your paintings, with your work. If you throw it away, it doesn't matter. What you learned from it, what you gained from it, it's already there. It's already with you, and you carry that with you and you grow from that. So to me, that's the most important part. So can we achieve that through cheap materials? Hell yes, for sure. We can do that for sure. So we have to just be in a mindset where we're thinking, Is this the prettiest, best quality painting that I can do? Probably not. But is this a moment of painting? Is this a time that I'm going to devote into a painting that is going to enrich me, and it's going to make me grow, and it's going to help me understand painting better and understand myself better? Yes, all those things are possible. So anyways, all that rant just because Katie was cool enough to send me one of the sickest, most awesome watercolor paper pads that I've ever seen, that I've ever worked with. And trust me, I've worked with a ton of stuff. I know really nice stuff. I know very crappy stuff. This stuff fooled me. You know, I could have sworn this was amazing paper. It wasn't. I don't care. Who cares? It's incredible. I used it and it works. My paintings look cool. So anyways, that was the paper that enabled me in a way to push the attitude that I wanted to push on Monday. For Tuesday, it was a little bit different, and I wanted to push the subtle saturation that we can get by using only our primary colors. So in my palette, that means that we're using bismuth yellow for my yellow hue, cad red and alizarin for my red hue, and ultramarine blue for my blue hue. So it's a somewhat saturated palette if you think about it, because bismuth yellow is saturated. Cad red is my most saturated color in the palette. Alizarin, really nice alizarin, can be a little saturated, even though it's transparent. And ultramarine blue, it's my workhorse blue, but I would never call it super saturated. There's far more saturated blue pigments in the blue hue. So I use that, and I try to cancel all my colors out by mixing complementaries. That was the way we tried to achieve grayness through yesterday's painting. Just constant complementary mixing. You know how I love my puddles in my palette, and it was just about shifting that puddle from side to side. If I have 3 colors mixed in there, I would just kind of move in the middle, just trying to shift the weight of the mix, going from one color to the next to the next. So that is my gorgeous puddle mixing technique. And that's what we did yesterday. And for today, you already noticed, this is a completely different and sort of weird painting. But I wanted to have fun, and I wanted to do this painting. And I was like, yeah, if we're going to talk about grays, and if I already introduced the power of that umber, of that raw umber on Monday, why not just really push this today and just have fun with it? What I did was something that is almost overkill. I think it's very redundant if I really think about it. I wanted to use the umbers that I had alongside the most neutral earth tone that I think I own, alongside with black. So the palette was titanium white, a Maimeri Classico raw umber, which is actually kind of greenish and warmish in a way. So that's the first color to the right of the titanium white. Then I have a Winton raw umber, which actually has black in it. So it's very cool. It's actually a very neutral cool. It's probably one of the coolest, cheapest, honestly, raw umbers that you can get. Then I used my Rembrandt Van Dyke Brown Cassel Earth, which in my mind, I was like, yeah, this is the most neutral earth tone. I still kind of believe that. Naturally, it's going to be the most neutral earth tone that you can get. And way off to the right, we have Ivory Black. So if you think about it, we went from warmer neutral to cooler neutral with the black. So we went from red to blue, if you want to think about it in terms of hue. Okay. And honestly, I had a blast. I was going to use an aspect of that first raw umber, the Maimeri Classico raw umber, that first one that I have off to the right of the titanium white. I was going to use the transparent quality of that raw umber. Remember, colors, aside from having these natural characteristics, they actually behave in 2 very different ways, particularly those that tend to be semi-transparent or transparent. So when you thin them down with whatever medium you're using. In my case, I'm using liquid. I'm trying to make my painting dry faster. I don't really care about the longevity of liquid. I know that it may be terrible, but it dries fast. That's a terrible reason to use it, but it's good enough for me. If I thin down with liquid, the raw umber, it has this very nice, rich, velvety, warm quality to it. It's a very nice, rich, earthy tone. And if you compare that when you mix raw umber with, again, one of the coolest colors that we can have in our palette, which is titanium white, then you get a insane gamut of possibilities, very different almost personalities in terms of how the color behaves. So raw umber, when lightened with white, feels like one color, and raw umber when thinned down with medium feels like a completely different color. So I wanted to use those two qualities, but I struggled with this a little bit. By the end, I decided to just cover up some of the more transparent areas of the raw umber. It was heading towards looking like a very traditional grisaille where your shadows are super, super transparent and warm. And that's totally fine. But what I wanted to speak about was more about grayness and neutrality. Yesterday, we spoke about a lot of temperature shifts and different hues. So today, yes, I do have access to differences in temperature for sure. My warmest being when that raw umber is transparent, and my coolest when that ivory black is mixed with titanium white. That's my bluest, quote unquote. So I do have access to that very wide range of temperature shifts, but I decided that I was going to cover it up a little bit. By the end, I left some hints of that transparent raw umber, and I'm very happy with that. I think it still showcases that range. And I was hoping that I could get very different things, very subtle but very different things for my palette. One thing that surprised me is that because that Winton raw umber has black in it, it literally has black pigment mixed in with it. It's actually cooler than my Cassel Earth. It's actually far cooler and, in a sense, far then more neutral than my Cassel Earth. So those two started competing with each other. I thought in my mind, and this is where I think I understand something, but then I realized it's a little bit different once I start painting. I thought that my temperature would go from warmest to coolest, and then in the middle, reaching Cassel Earth would be my most neutral. But in truth, I could have changed the spots of the Cassel Earth with the Winton raw umber, and that would have probably been closer to what I intended to from the beginning. So it was a little bit redundant when I was trying to use and showcase that what I thought was going to be a big difference between the Cassel Earth and the raw umber and the Winton raw umber. But, didn't happen. I could have used one of those two and it would have been fine. In hindsight, I could have just used the Maimeri Classico raw umber, then the Winton raw umber, and then my Ivory Black. And those would have been perfectly fine. So one of those colors there overlap, and I could have done without. So that's a cool lesson that I learned from today's painting. But I thought doing an exercise like this, it just reminds me of what's beautiful to me about the fundamentals of painting. I realized, I love color, but if I have to be totally honest with you guys, I think I love temperature more and I love value. So if I'm putting in a scale the intrinsic characteristics of color, I would say value is the most important one, then temperature, then hue, and then saturation. To me, to my sensibility, those are the most important things. And it would be very exciting for you guys to do some self-examination and say, wait, out of those 4 characteristics, which are 4 fundamental characteristics that are, the makeup of a color, which are the ones that interest me most? Value, temperature, hue, or saturation. And some of you can have it completely flipped. Some of you could say, I love hues. I want to have a wide variety of hues in my painting. I want to have yellows and oranges and reds and violets and blues and greens. And then you can probably say, aside from having all these hues available to me, I want them to be rich. I want them to be saturated. So in your mind, the most important aspect would be hue range, then saturation. And then you could say, and I want temperature shifts because that's what's going to showcase a lot of the differences between that wide variety of hues. So you could have temperature there. And then in the end, you could be like, and value, I don't care. I'm going to use the natural raw power of my pigments to speak about them as this very abstract notion of color. So, value, I'm not interested in it. Maybe I'm not a representational painter. Maybe I'm not a naturalist painter. Maybe I don't really care about, following the values that I see in nature. I'm talking about the tonal values that I see in nature. Maybe I'm super expressive and all I want is for the raw color to just bring all of its strength and all of its power to the canvas, to the painting, and I want to generate relationships between that. So you could actually flip my priorities and still do a fantastic painting, an amazing painting. You would probably be like a neo-expressionist painter, and that would be awesome. That would be absolutely amazing. So those are totally fine. There's no right or wrong here. We could say, I don't care about value. And, some people would lose their mind. Some people would be like, what? What do you mean you don't care about value? And you could say, well, in the scale of things I think about and I care about and are closest to my sensibility, value doesn't really matter to me, and I'm not trying to use value to represent, to model form, or to do anything that is faithful to nature. So I'm not really concerned about that. And you could get the argument, and I would say that, deep inside, that's something that I actually do believe in, that all of these things are tied together. That it's very difficult to say, I am going to take one thing out, I'm going to be able to dissect it and just understand it as an individual quality of color. It's very hard. In the end, these are 4 kind of things that you have to juggle in the air, but they are the makeup of one thing. So it is very difficult to try and understand them individually, but we totally can. And we can do it in the sense that we can favor one of those things. We're not negating the other aspects. We're just saying, I favor 1 or 2 of those aspects over the other aspects of color. So it's a cool thing to actually think about if you want to do that exercise. So that was super fun for me today. It brought me back to my fundamentals. It is, in essence, a very classical grisaille. It's a painting about modeling form, about turning form, about respecting value. That to me was incredibly cool. It felt really nice to go back to one of these paintings. And like I always say, this painting doesn't leave me yearning for anything. And before this painting, I just did a painting solely with primary colors, with a lot of them being, somewhat saturated, one of them being very saturated. So I had just done a painting that was born from all these very rich colors. And for today, I didn't miss the experience that I had yesterday. I quickly accepted the variables that were available to me today. And I said, yes, that's the painting that I have to do. Period. I kind of shifted gears very quickly, and I tried to recognize everything that today's painting can offer to me. And hopefully I can tap into that. When an observer sees this painting, they don't go like, oh, it's really nice, but it doesn't have any color. No, it actually speaks about that earthy quality of paint. And hopefully there's enough, variations, subtle variations within that earthy quality that it feels very rich. So that was today's painting. I had a blast. It really is important for me to remind myself that this is what I love. And like I tell you guys, what I love, it doesn't have to be the same thing that you guys enjoy. Not at all. You guys can have your own set of priorities, and we can sit down and talk about painting, and we can have a blast talking about painting, even though we are producing very different paintings. At the end, none of that matters. Painting should unite us in this conversation and not have us fight about what the best approach of painting would be. No, painting is not about denying yourself possibilities and just kicking yourself for not painting one way or the other, or just feeling like crap because you can't devote enough time to paint in certain manners. No, painting is a good thing. Painting is inherently a really nice, beautiful, good thing. So don't ruin it with any of those things. If you can gain something from painting, then it's doing a good job. That's all you need to know. If you're learning from it, if you feel frustrated after you paint, but you feel like, this awesome rage that you want to get back, to painting the next day, that's awesome. Or if you feel like, the happiest you've ever been because it filled your soul and you want to keep doing it, the next day, that's fantastic too. But there's no right way of doing this. There's only a right attitude when doing it. And that enables us to be part of an act, of an experience that can give so much back to us. So just keep that in mind. So anyways, that was today's painting. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Tomorrow, join us for another approach in trying to understand greys. So we'll see what we'll do tomorrow. I'll see you guys later. Bye.